Thank you very much, and I greet all of you, all participants of this very, very important conference, and especially my thanks to Professor Kudori for organizing this. I think that many people in the world realize that we are probably faced with the worst crisis in history ever. I think it's legitimate to say that because the danger of a thermonuclear war is extremely close. And if it ever would come to that, and it could easily arise out of the Ukraine situation, which is really a war between NATO and Russia and implicitly against China, it would lead to the annihilation of the human species because, it has been argued by many experts that there is no such thing as a limited nuclear war. If one nuclear weapon is used, it probably will lead to the exchange of the entire nuclear arsenal and thus lead to a nuclear winter in which nobody would survive. I think that is the thing we have to really overcome. This is driven by the fact that the neoliberal financial system is in its final collapse phase, which is reflected in a hyperinflationary explosion of prices, food, energy. This is in large part the result of the sanctions against Russia and other countries, but more fundamentally the result of the quantitative easing, pumping money, trillions of trillions after the systemic crisis of 2008. And, this is really the motor behind the war danger. So this has resulted in a situation where 1.7 billion people are threatened with starvation, in incredible world famine. You have a world health crisis. And, this is why I think the spirit of Bandung is so very important. I think it is absolutely important to remember that President Sukarno at the Bandung conference said colonialism is not dead. And so it's not dead today. The Western democracies pretend that the real conflict is between the democracies and the autocracies. But I think it is much more a fight between those forces in the world who want to keep the colonial order and those countries, especially of the global south, who want to fight now for good for their right for economic development. So the rise of the non-aligned movement at this point is probably the most important force on the planet to overcome geopolitics. And I think to stop geopolitics is the way how we will avoid World War III. We have to learn to think about the one humanity first, not in terms of blocks, not in terms of zero-sum games, but we have to think about the one humanity and a new paradigm of thinking. Now, there is an effort to have a global NATO. That would be for sure the road to World War III. And I think we have called, that's the Schiller Institute, for a new global security and development architecture, which must take into account the interest of every single country on the planet. The closest approximation to that comes from President Xi Jinping, who has called for a global security architecture initiative and a global development initiative. And, this is has to be put on the agenda for sure. The best would be if a group of non-aligned nations would, basically go together to the G20 meeting, which will start next week in Indonesia. And if they would put on the table the need to have an immediate reorganization of the world financial system, which is bankrupt. And I think the non-aligned movement has the authority to do that, because between the member countries, who have 4.5 billion people, and the observer countries, who have 2 billion people, that makes 6,571 billion people of 8 billion. So that's clearly the majority of the world. Also, President Sukarno at the time had said, if it comes to a new world war, the oceans will not protect the countries of the South. And, Nehru at the same conference said that if it comes to a block building, it will come to a new war for sure. So therefore, the non-aligned movement has to really get together, rethink their role in terms of history, and put on the table a new credit system. And the previous speaker attacked the Bretton Woods system for good reasons, because this was made by Churchill and not by Franklin D. Roosevelt. The idea is we need a new credit system which puts the overcoming of the underdevelopment of the developing countries as the first priority. There are clear precedents how you can build a new monetary credit system. You have to start with ending the casino economy, global Glass-Steagall separation of the banks, which for the developing countries means basically capital controls to prevent speculation, then have a national bank in every single country, and then have a credit system which gives low interest, long-term credit for the development of the developing countries. Now, that has to build up basic infrastructure, industrialization, double food production, World Health System. I think the pandemic has shown that unless you have a modern health system in every single country, you cannot stop the pandemic, and there will be new ones. So if the G20 meeting next week fails to put this on the table, and there will be probably opposition against such an idea coming from the West, then the non-aligned movement must find a soon to be created opportunity to put this on the agenda. Call for a new emergency UN General Assembly, but take action, because I think the non-aligned movement is the most important force, and you have to raise your voice, because we have right now an incredible danger to all civilization, and that must inspire the leaders of the non-aligned movement to take a much more active role, because I think you are the only force which can prevent world catastrophe. Thank you.